Welcome to Moments with Marilyn. I'm your host, Marilyn Boyer, the mom of 14 homeschool kids. I absolutely love sharing with young moms, and it's my passion to encourage you and give you tips and tools to make your journey easier. Today, we're going to be talking about Savor the Season. And wow, Rick and I used to joke whenever we'd hear the hymn, Blessed Quietness, saying, what is that? Quietness was not something that you often experienced in our home. I remember times when the noise was so overpowering that I would just call a quiet time, say, okay guys, sit on the couch, find a book to read, we're going to have it quiet for the next 15 minutes, just so that I could retain my sanity. And it wasn't that the kids were being bad, but when you've got 16 people living in the same house, it's just not quiet. It's busy, it's active. There's always something going on. Well, things have changed now. My kids have all moved out. 10 of them are married, 2 are dating, and 1 is just super focused on her goals. And my house is really quiet. And I'm not sure I like it. I had a friend over recently and she said, wow, it's so weird that your house is quiet. It just doesn't seem like your house. It has advantages sometimes when I'm writing a series of readers for master books right now, and it's much easier to write when the house is quiet for sure. But I loved experiencing life with my growing kiddos. And I'm proud of them for the people they've become, the people they've turned out to be. But I do miss being a mommy to little people. I do a lot of stuff with my grandkids, so I do get to be around little people, but it is different. And, you know, I miss those days when I had all little guys underfoot. I love this song that Doug Oldham used to sing. The words are, we have this moment to hold in our hands, to touch as it slips through our fingers like sand. Yesterday's gone and tomorrow may never come, but we have this moment today. And I just want to take a couple weeks to encourage you mommies who are right in the middle of chaos and feeling like you don't have a spare minute to yourself. Even when you go in the bathroom, they seem to know and they're banging on the door. But, you know, life is fleeting. That 4-year-old will soon be 16, getting their driver's license, and life will change for you. Life is full of changes, but a child grows so quickly. 5 years makes an incredibly huge difference in your child's life. So enjoy your child when they're little. There'll be time for other things later, but you'll never get those years back when your house is bursting with little people who are looking to you for everything, it seems. So learn to embrace it. Experience the joy with your little ones. Hold fast to those snuggling times. Read to them often. Stop what you're doing sometimes and just look at their face and express delight in what they're delighted in. You can't always do what they want you to do every moment they want you to do it, but let them know that you would rather be spending time with them than mopping the floor or whatever it is you're engaged in at the time. And sometimes just stop what you're doing and go out and watch the ants crawling around carrying breadcrumbs or whatever it is your kids are excited about. Just be excited about those little things that delight them. Don't wish for tomorrow, but like the song says, make memories of what was today. And only you can do that. You know, it's a conscious thing. You have to stop and think. You need to raise your kids in a home that they're going to want to come back to, that they've got good memories of. And you can be responsible for that. You can make the memories. You can make difficult things into good things. So I want to just talk about the seasons of life. First of all, recognize God does take us through seasons. Some are pleasant, some are difficult, some are heartbreaking. And Satan is hard at work. He's trying to get us to become bitter. But God does not allow us to go through anything that doesn't pass through his hands. And he wants to use those times in our life to make us better Christians, better servants of the living God, more useful in his kingdom. You know, I've always worked by setting a basic schedule of what I want to accomplish, what I know I need to have done. But there are times in life when all the best laid intentions just don't cut it, and life interrupts your best laid plans. But I've found that God is the master, And in my experience, there have been many times that God has planned for my family a curriculum, if you would, that we would not have chosen for ourselves. But in retrospect, it was during those stressful times that we grew together as a family and learned some lessons about the true meaning of life. It's not pleasant when you're going through it, some of the seasons, but afterwards, in retrospect, you can learn from it. And remember, seasons don't last forever. So I try to tell myself, God, what can I learn through this? How can this experience make me more like you? What are you trying to teach me? And how can I cooperate with your plans for me? Help me to draw near to you through this. Just a couple weeks ago, I was sitting stopped behind a line of traffic, and another car came up and plowed in, rear-ended my car. And I pulled off the road, but I consciously said, God, what are you trying to teach me through this? What can I learn from this? How can I see your hand in this? And we need to teach ourselves to do that, because he does have plans for our life, and he doesn't allow anything to happen to us that is not for our good. So I'm just going to talk to you about some of the seasons I have been through and what the sweetness was. I found that in every season you go through, usually after you're through it and when it's over, it has a sweetness to it. And if you look for that positive, if you look for that sweetness, you can find it. First of all, pregnancy. Like I said, I had 14 kids, and I figured out I was pregnant over 11 years if you stuck it all together. And I always got sick the first 3 months. Thankfully, I wasn't sick the entire pregnancy like some people are, but I was sick the first 3 months. But I found that it was difficult to get up and press on with the schedule and get it done. But I did discover I didn't feel any better if I was laying on the couch than if I was up doing stuff. So for me, I just felt better if I tried to stay on my schedule. Or if there was a day when I just felt too lousy to be up and around, we'd just sit and read. We'd make use of that time and read to the kids. Then after the new baby was born, it seemed impossible to get anything done other than the basics for the next 6 months till the baby grew to a certain point and settled into their own schedule. I never had any help that would stay with me when a baby was born. So the kids just had to chip in and help me out. But it was during those times that my kids learned to develop a servant spirit in the home. I remember after my 10th child was born, my 2 oldest sons fixed me cream of wheat for breakfast for the next few weeks, which was very sweet of them. And the sweetness that I found in that season was the kids learned parenting skills. They learned to be sensitive to mom, to the baby. They learned to care for each other. They learned to pitch in and maybe help the toddler, fix lunch, whatever they could do to pitch in and help. So it had its sweetness. Plus, you get a baby at the end of it. Sickness was another biggie. If the kids were sick, we would just kick back and read together instead of trying to do math, science, or if you feel rotten, I just plug in an audiobook and let the kids listen so they can learn. Even if they're laying there on the couch feeling bad, they can learn from it. And the sweetness of that situation is that the kids were still learning and enjoying it. But I was also getting to practice being extra tender to them when they were sick. Sometimes in the busyness of life, you forget to be tender to your kids. But it was a sweet time to experience that tenderness when you're being extra sensitive to them when they're not feeling well. Then just life with little kids. I had 4 kids 5 and under. And this was one of the hardest times for me, because I had to care for all the kids, I had to train them, I had to take care of the house, I had to cook, do the laundry, clean, pretty much you're 24/7. Everything is left up to mom, and you hardly ever get a break. It was often too expensive to hire a sitter. We very, very seldom hired a sitter. As the kids grew older, I was able to train them to do chores, which is very important for them to learn how to do. But when they were 5 and under, they couldn't do much to help as far as chores. But there's a sweetness in that. I look back at it. I had control of my kids, their schedules, their mealtime. And then there was just the sweetness of having little people to hug and to love and to read to. They're so dependent on their parents for everything. And you get to demonstrate that love to them. You get to teach them and see their interests develop and read to them and see them grow. And I would love to go back just for a week and have my kids little again for a day. There was a sweetness. Although at times I didn't see it. I felt overwhelmed and busy. But there's such a sweetness. One of the toughest seasons was when our fourth son, Josh, had leukemia. And this Friday will be the 27th anniversary of his going to heaven. I cannot believe it's been that long. But life really threw us a curveball when Josh was diagnosed with leukemia. He started out getting headaches, and the doctors thought it was sinus infection, so they gave him some antibiotics, but the headaches got worse. Eventually, they found out it was leukemia, and it floored me. I mean, it kind of shocked the doctors. They said, "You're our healthiest family in our practice," and it threw us for a loop. I was due with baby number 13 3 weeks after Josh was diagnosed, and suddenly our whole life was transformed into hospital stays, talks with doctors, trying to learn about leukemia. There's so many kinds of leukemia, you wouldn't believe it. It was just a whole different world for me. We had to be up at a hospital, which was an hour and a half away from where we live, talking with doctors, learning, caring for Josh. You know, and at first I tried to continue homeschooling in the mornings, but in just a couple days I realized this is not going to work. Josh needed me with him, and there were not enough hours in a day for school to be an option. Life was basically survival for the 7 months of Josh's illness. And I always, during that time, felt like a rubber band just stretched in 1,000 directions, stretched to the max, felt like I was going to pop. My 13th child was born 3 weeks later, and I would carry her in her pack and play and her diaper bag and a suitcase for her and myself when I had to stay up there, activities for Josh, and I'd push her up in her stroller and put all this stuff inside her stroller. It's hard to describe the ups and downs of those months. I felt like I was not meeting the needs of my kids at home. My oldest daughter kind of took care of the kids at home. People from the church chipped in and brought meals. But Josh needed me the most. And my baby had to go with me where I went because I was nursing her. So I would take my 9-year-old daughter or my 7-year-old daughter to help watch her while mom and dad were busy talking with doctors. There was a lot of conferences and them trying to explain things to us. And you know, we all tried to spend whatever time we could with Josh, and school took a back seat. 7 months later, Josh went to be with Jesus, the Lord and his Lord and Savior. But there was such a sweetness. So let me just say, we recently had a seminar in our church that talked about dealing with grief, and it was so interesting because I always thought of grief as when somebody dies. But the instructor was talking about grief can be like losing a pet or running over a child's toy in the driveway. Child goes through grief. And he talked about how we need to teach our kids to work through grief because there's going to be times of grief in our life, even like losing a job or there's so many things that grief can be attached to that I never really realized that. But a couple things I just wanted to point out on dealing with grief. He's talked about focusing on a productive use of your time. And I look back, when Josh died, we took that time, it was in March, it was March 22nd, and instead of launching right back into school and trying to catch up for the school year, I just really felt like we needed to take the rest of the year off and focus on memories of Josh. And it was such a healing time for my kids. We made scrapbooks, scrapbooks of pictures of Josh, but also things we remembered about him. Even the children that were too little to write, I would ask them, we'd have a page in their little book, and I'd say, draw a picture of something you remember doing with Josh, or you remember Josh doing, and then tell me about it. And I would write down their memory of what they remembered about Josh. And it was such a healing time. I really think it helped all the kids deal with their grief. And people deal with grief in different ways. So it wasn't just dealing with my grief, it was dealing with the grief of all his brothers and sisters too. And it took some time to work through that. But instead of trying to forget it, trying to block it out, trying to pretend it didn't happen, we attacked it, if you will. We got pictures of Josh and we laughed and talked about memories, things we remembered him doing. And it was such a healing thing. So if you are in a situation of grief, remember that it really helps to have conversations about the person you lost, or the thing that you lost, or the item that you lost, whatever. It's a good thing to talk about it and to give thanks for the time that you spent with that person rather than regrets that they're gone. He also suggested to focus on others and that service opportunities are spiritual antidepressants. And we found that too. I involved my kids all through the years on visiting shut-ins and visiting elderly people and veterans, and we still did that. We focused on other people's needs. For several years, we put on a benefit concert for another child who had leukemia, and all the family was involved in getting the singers and putting on all the details involved in that. There were a lot of details involved in it to raise money to help the family that had a child with leukemia. Somebody did that for us when Josh was sick, and it was such a blessing. So we invested in doing that for others for a number of years, and inviting those kids with leukemia into our home and ministering to them and going to visit them in the hospital and things like that. And reaching out and involving ourselves with others was a sweetness. It was a blessing. And it really helped us to deal with the grief. We also talked about the blessings that other people were to us during that time. Church people brought meals. My daughter Kate wrote a whole list of meals, I think almost every day. I wasn't there a lot. It got to where Josh wanted me to spend the nights in the hospital with him. So Kelly, the baby, and I would spend the night, and one of the other kids, and Kate would kind of handle things at home. Rick would go home to be at home with the kids. But people from church brought meals. At Christmas time, our family doctors they pulled up in front of our house. They had a horse trailer full of gifts for the family because they knew that our time was limited, that Mom and Dad wouldn't have time to do much shopping for Christmas, so they brought gifts in for every member of the family. Just the sweetest thing. And then also, Josh's attitude was amazing. He said, Mom, I'm in a win-win situation. I'm either going to be healed on earth or I'm going to be healed in heaven. And we knew that was true. God could have healed him. He could have chosen to do that. Instead, he chose to take him to heaven. And he actually got to testify or tell his story to a newspaper. The local newspaper came and interviewed Josh and did an article. And he shared his relationship with Jesus Christ, and they printed that in the newspaper article. He heard from a couple people. There was one elderly man that confirmed his salvation after reading that article about Josh in the newspaper. So when I know that people always say, don't ask God why, but after Josh died, I did ask why. I said, not like, why did you do this? So shaking my fist at the Lord, but I said, Lord, I know that you allowed this to happen for a purpose. Please show me some of those purposes. And God in his mercy showed me lots of purposes, lots of ways he used Josh's suffering and Josh's life to influence others. We heard of 14 people that got saved as a result of Josh's being sick. There were people praying for him in every state. We heard from people in every state in the U.S. plus 14 foreign countries of people that were praying for him. People held 24-hour prayer meetings. People would plug in what hour they wanted to pray. It was just amazing how people surrounded our family. And Josh said, Mom, I can feel people praying for me when I wake up in the middle of the night. I can feel prayer. So we had so many blessings during that time. Yes, it was hard. Yes, I would not want to go through it again. It was a terrible experience in ways, but God turned that terrible experience around and used it for good, and he blessed many people. And I think when we get to heaven, we're going to hear of more people that were influenced by that situation. When I think of Josh, I have a smile on my face, because Josh liked to be the first person in the family to do things, even from the time he was a little boy. And I know when I get to heaven, he's going to say, "Mom, I'm so glad you're here. Let me show you around." You know, heaven's forever. And Josh is not dead. He is not here on earth, but he's very much alive, more alive than any of us are. And heaven is a reality. You know, he's not dead, he's alive. And we're all going to be together in heaven for eternity, forever and ever and ever. And our time on earth is going to seem so short. So I cannot be bitter about that. I cannot say, "Lord, why did you choose to do this?" And as I say, God in his mercy showed me many ways that he used Josh's testimony in the lives of so many people. And you know, all my family are better people because of it. You tend to kind of take your family for advantage. You expect for your parents to die before you. You expect maybe your aunts and uncles to die before you. But you don't expect your kids or your brother to die before you. And I think it's made my whole family more serious about life, more intentional about life, realizing that life is a vapor and we are not promised tomorrow. And I think it has made better people, more intentionally servant-hearted people out of all of us. You know, we tend to flock around people that are experiencing a loss and see if we can help them through that. You know, God takes the toughest things we go through and he wants to make us better, and he wants to use those experiences. He wants to bring us through victorious so that we can then help others through their tough times so they can be victorious too. Okay, I think I'm going to close for now. I've got some other situations I want to walk you through, but we'll continue this next week. Thanks for joining us today, and I hope this has been helpful to you in the season that you're in.